Welcome to Scoli Sleep Stories. Before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable, let the day soften around you, and settle in for a calm documentary made for curious minds. If these stories help you rest, learn, or simply enjoy a quieter part of the day, please consider liking this episode and subscribing to the channel. Now, when you are ready, let us begin. Chapter 1. At the Edge of the Hive. The day has grown long, and the light has begun to soften. Along the edge of a quiet garden, where the grass gives way to a low wooden fence, a row of hives stands in the last warmth of the afternoon. They are simple boxes, painted in muted whites and pale greens, their edges worn smooth by weather and many gentle hands. The sun rests low behind the trees, and everything here has slowed. The heat of the day lifts away. The air carries a faint, sweet scent, somewhere between honey, warm wood, and the green fragrance of growing things. If you stand still, you may notice a sound before you notice anything else. It is not the sound of a single insect, sharp and near. It is something softer, a low and blended hum, the gathered voice of thousands of wings moving together somewhere within the wooden walls. It rises and falls so gently that it seems less like a noise and more like a presence, a quiet warmth held inside the hive. A few bees still cross the cooling air, drifting home through the golden light. Their small bodies catch the last of the sun before they slip through a narrow entrance and disappear inside. Some arrive carrying pollen, packed into small bundles on their hind legs. The colors vary with the flowers they have visited. One bee may return with a soft yellow load, while another carries something closer to orange or muted cream. A place like this, where managed hives are kept, is called an apiary. The practice of keeping and managing bees is known as apiculture. It is an old practice, and it has taken countless forms across the long span of human history. At its heart, however, it has often looked something like this quiet scene at the edge of a garden. People live beside bees. They watch them, learn their seasons, offer them shelter, and receive honey and wax from the hidden world within the hive. The story we will follow concerns mostly honeybees, especially the western honeybee, known to science as Apis mellifera. This is the species found in much of the recorded beekeeping history of Europe and North America, yet it is not the only bee whose story matters. Asian beekeeping also includes the eastern honeybee, Apis cerana, along with several other honeybee species. In warmer parts of the world, people have long managed stingless bees, which are social bees but do not belong to the genus Apis. Beyond them is an even wider company. More than 20,000 bee species have been described. Many live solitary lives rather than forming large colonies, and only a small number make harvestable stores of honey. So this is a history of beekeeping, but it unfolds within the far greater history of people, flowers, landscapes, and many kinds of pollinating creatures. Behind the wooden walls lives what beekeepers call a colony. It includes one reproductive queen, thousands of workers, male drones during much of the reproductive season, developing young, and stores of food. The workers are female and ordinarily do not reproduce. They perform most of the tasks that sustain the colony. The drones are male, and their principal biological role is connected with reproduction. Tucked into the warm heart of the comb is the brood. This word means the eggs, larvae, and pupae developing in the wax cells. Nearby are stores of pollen and honey, gathered during days of abundant bloom and held for times when flowers are fewer. The workers are the bees we see moving through the evening air. They travel out to gather nectar, pollen, water, and plant resins. The resins are carried home and modified into propolis, a fragrant material used to seal small openings and protect parts of the nest. It gathers wherever wooden surfaces meet, giving the hive a faint scent of trees, sap, wax, and summer warmth. Honey begins mainly as floral nectar. A worker gathers this thin liquid from a blossom and carries it home. Bees transform it with enzymes and gradually remove much of its water. They pass it among themselves, place it in cells, and move air over the comb with their wings. In time, the nectar becomes concentrated honey, a durable food store that can sustain the colony when the landscape no longer offers a steady flow of flowers. The wax around it is made by the bees themselves. Young workers secrete small flakes of beeswax from glands on the underside of their bodies. The flakes are worked and shaped into comb, a structure of adjoining cells. These cells serve as nursery, pantry, and storage room. The queen lays eggs in some, others hold pollen or honey. To human eyes, the repeated pattern can seem almost impossibly exact. Yet it arises from the combined work of many bees, each responding to the bees nearby, to the shape of the growing comb, and to conditions within the nest. It is tempting to imagine the queen as a ruler directing all this labor, but the queen does not consciously command the colony. Communication takes place through chemical signals, touch, vibration, movement, and the shared responses of many individuals. Colony behavior emerges from all these small actions together. Scientists sometimes describe a colony as a superorganism. This is a useful analogy, suggesting that the colony can function in certain ways like a larger coordinated whole. It does not mean that the colony is literally one animal. It remains a community of individual bees, each alive and active, within the greater pattern. As workers move among flowers, pollen may cling to their bodies and pass from one blossom to another. This transfer can allow fertilization in many flowering plants. It is called pollination. People have valued honeybees for honey and wax over a very long history, while pollination became a major commercial service much later. Honeybees are significant pollinators, but they are not the only pollinators, nor are they always the best visitors for every plant. Wild bees, flies, butterflies, moths, beetles, birds, and bats all take part in the wider work of carrying pollen. Even the wind performs that task for many plants. Here at the apiary, the distinction feels easy to hold. The honeybee colony is both remarkable and familiar, one part of a much larger living landscape. The last light now lies across the hive lids. The wood has released the heat it stored through the afternoon, and the grass is cool beneath the lengthening shadows. Activity at the entrances is diminishing. One more worker crosses the garden, then another. Each enters the hive and joins the low communal hum behind the walls. Long before anyone built these wooden boxes, before there were removable frames, veils, or metal tools, people learned to notice bees in wilder places. They found colonies in hollow trees, in crevices of rock, and in sheltered corners of the land. They watched flight paths across shafts of sunlight and listened for a distant murmur hidden in wood or stone. Before there were hives, there was honey, and before beekeeping, there was the patient art of finding it. Chapter 2. Honey Before Hives. Let the garden fade for a while, and imagine an older landscape. There are no painted hive boxes and no straight wooden frames. A path passes beneath trees, following the edge of a shaded forest. Sunlight falls in narrow beams through the leaves. Somewhere beyond sight, bees travel steadily between flowers and a hollow in an old trunk. Humans probably gathered honey long before written history. Earlier hominins may have sought it as well, though direct evidence from such distant times is rare. Honey, wax, baskets, and wooden tools do not usually survive across thousands of years. What remains is fragmentary. There are images on stone, chemical traces in pottery, and the long continuity of honey gathering in many parts of the world. Gathering honey and wax from wild colonies is called honey hunting. It is distinct from beekeeping. A honey hunter locates a colony in a naturally chosen nest. A beekeeper maintains bees in a human-made or deliberately managed nesting place. The boundary between these activities may sometimes have been gradual, but the distinction is important. Evidence that people used honey does not necessarily show that they kept colonies. One of the best-known images associated with prehistoric honey gathering lies at the Cueva de la Araña in eastern Spain. The rock art appears to show a person climbing toward a wild bee nest while carrying a container. Small marks around the figure are often interpreted as bees. The image is commonly described as roughly 8,000 years old. Yet the distant past asks for careful language. Rock paintings can be difficult to date directly, and their meaning is not always certain. Pigments, nearby deposits, and artistic styles provide clues, but not always final answers. The image appears to represent honey gathering, and that interpretation is widely repeated, though its precise age remains open to study. Rock art in southern Africa, India, and other regions has also been interpreted as showing people gathering honey. Dates and meanings vary. A pattern resembling comb may truly represent beeswax cells, or it may carry another meaning now lost to us. The evidence offers glimpses rather than a complete account. Other traces are almost invisible. Archaeologists have found chemical residues of beeswax in prehistoric pottery from parts of Europe, Anatolia, the Near East, and North Africa. Some of these finds date to the 7th millennium BCE. Wax may have been used in many ways, perhaps as part of food preparation, craftwork, waterproofing, coatings, or other daily activities. These residues establish that people used bee products. They do not by themselves establish that those people maintained hives. The wax may have come from wild nests, gathered with honey, and carried home in vessels of clay, fiber, hide, bark, or wood. To find a wild colony required knowledge of place. A person might watch bees crossing an open patch of sky and notice the direction in which they returned. The flight paths of several foragers could lead toward a hollow tree or a crevice in rock. A faint hum might be heard near an opening. Local knowledge would also reveal when particular plants flowered, when colonies held ample stores, and where water and nesting sites could be found. In some African regions today, cooperation between people and greater honey-guide birds is well documented. The bird may guide a person toward a bee nest, and both can benefit from the gathering that follows. This relationship is remarkable, but its antiquity is unknown. It should not be placed confidently in prehistory simply because it exists now. Smoke has long accompanied honey gathering and beekeeping. A little smoke can interrupt alarm communication among honeybees and reduce defensive responses. It does not put them to sleep. Its effects are more subtle. Used carefully, thin smoke allows people to approach a colony with less disturbance than a sudden opening might cause. Imagine a small bundle of dry plant material sending a pale thread of smoke upward. The smoke drifts among leaves and disappears. Nearby are a woven container, a length of rope, and a smooth stone ledge cooled by shade. Nothing in the scene needs to be hurried. The people who know this place have watched it through the season. They understand the flowering plants, the bees' direction of travel, and the shape of the hidden nest. Honey brought sweetness and concentrated energy. Wax offered a material that softened with warmth, hardened when cool, resisted water, and could be worked into many forms. Both could be carried home, shared, traded, stored, or used in craft. Perhaps some early gatherers began to protect known nesting places. Perhaps they altered openings, moved occupied sections of wood, or provided attractive cavities nearer to home. Such possibilities are reasonable, but the surviving evidence rarely tells us exactly when gathering became management. That change probably did not happen once, in only one place. Beekeeping developed incrementally in many regions. People experimented with the materials close at hand: hollow logs, bark, woven fibers, clay, reeds, stone walls, and wooden boxes. A wild nest offered a model. Bees preferred shelter, a suitable entrance, and enough space for comb. Human beings learned to provide such places. The forest edge is quiet again. Honey and wax have been placed in simple vessels. A trace of smoke lingers among the branches, and bees continue their journeys through the afternoon light. Over time, some of those journeys would begin and end not in hollow trees, but in homes made by human hands. Among the clearest early images of that transition are rows of long clay hives beside the gardens and waters of the Nile. Chapter 3: The Hives of Ancient Egypt. Morning light comes gently to the Nile Valley. Water moves between green banks and reeds lean toward the river. Beyond them lie irrigated gardens, flowering crops, mud brick walls, and shaded places where people work before the day becomes too warm. In this landscape, ancient images preserve some of the earliest clear visual evidence of organized beekeeping. A relief from the 5th dynasty Sun Temple of Nusere, dating to around the 25th century BCE, shows people working with bees and bee products. The scene is an important landmark in the history of apiculture. It does not prove that beekeeping began in Egypt. Other traditions may have existed without leaving records that survived. Yet the Egyptian relief shows unmistakable organization, with hives, workers, handling methods, and processing brought together in one enduring image. The hives shown in Egyptian art are horizontal cylinders, probably made from clay or mud. They could be arranged in rows or stacked, creating a wall of rounded openings. Each long tube offered a sheltered cavity in which bees could attach their comb. Beekeepers appear to have worked from the ends of these hives. Smoke was used, just as it has been in many later traditions, to alter alarm communication and make handling calmer. Combs could then be reached from the opening. The work required familiarity with the colony, the season, and the condition of the stores inside. The hive material suited the landscape. Clay and mud were readily available, and thick earthen walls offered shelter from heat. Imagine their surfaces in shades of ochre and pale brown, warmed by the sun but cooler within. Woven mats could cast a little shade. River air carried the mingled scents of water, damp soil, flowers, smoke, and wax. The Nile Valley provided varied forage. Bees could visit riverbank plants, flowering crops, trees, and irrigated gardens. The precise abundance changed with place and season, as it does in every beekeeping landscape. Colonies lived within the rhythm of water, cultivation, and bloom. Honey had several recorded uses in ancient Egypt. It was food, a valuable sweet substance in a world without modern refined sugar. It could also be presented as an offering. Egyptian medical texts include honey as an ingredient in some preparations, showing that it held a place in ancient practical knowledge. Those records tell us how honey was used, though they do not mean every ancient treatment was effective in the way its users hoped. Modern research has found that some honeys have antimicrobial properties, but these vary with the honey and the application. It is best to let the ancient sources speak for themselves. Honey was valued, selected, and included in preparations whose meanings belonged to their time. Beeswax was equally versatile. It could serve in lamps, coatings, models, craft processes, and ritual objects. Warmed wax could be shaped by hand. When cooled, it held fine detail. It could seal a surface, protect a material, or feed the quiet flame of a small lamp. Claims that honey was routinely used to embalm Egyptian bodies are often exaggerated. Funerary practice varied by era and circumstance. Beeswax did have funerary and ritual uses, but the evidence does not support turning every possibility into a universal custom. The bee also appeared in Egyptian symbolism. It was associated with Lower Egypt and formed part of royal titles and imagery. Such symbols show the cultural importance of the bee, though they do not tell us exactly how ordinary households managed colonies. Royal language and daily beekeeping belong to related but distinct parts of the past. Later Egyptian images add further detail. Scenes associated with the tomb of Rekhmire show honey processing and storage. Honey is handled and poured into vessels, its slow movement suggested in the painted forms. Pottery jars wait nearby, ready to receive and preserve what has been gathered. We can imagine a shaded work area. Smooth clay vessels rest on woven mats. Honey falls in a narrow golden stream. Pieces of wax catch the light. A small lamp glows against a wall as evening approaches. The people in these scenes inherited knowledge from earlier generations and passed it onward. They understood how to shape a nesting place, how to use smoke, how to open a hive, and how to separate and store its products. Their methods were adapted to their materials and their climate. They did not possess every modern explanation of colony biology, nor was such knowledge necessary for all practical success. Careful observation could reveal when bees were active, when honey was ready, and how a colony responded to disturbance. The river continues beyond the gardens, carrying boats, reeds, pottery, grain, and stories between communities. A sealed jar of honey might remain near home, enter a temple store, or travel along routes of exchange. Wax, too, could pass from beekeeper to craft worker, from hive to lamp, model, coating, or ritual object. Across the Mediterranean, other people were also shaping homes for bees from clay, cork, wood, and woven plants. They watched swarms gather, listened to hives through changing seasons, and wrote of what they believed they saw. So the scene beside the Nile widens. The clay tubes remain in their quiet rows, while beyond them lie olive groves, herb gardens, terracotta courtyards, and another long chapter in the human study of bees. Chapter 4. Bees around the ancient Mediterranean. The afternoon sun rests on warm stone. Olive leaves turn silver in a light breeze, and the scents of thyme and rosemary rise from a garden path. Near a low wall, bees drink from the damp edge of a shallow spring. A row of terracotta hives stands in partial shade. Archaeological finds from ancient Greece include pottery hives and hive parts, among them horizontal terracotta forms. Their shapes and details varied across place and time. Some were long vessels laid on their sides. Other traditions used baskets, wooden containers, cork, or woven plant material. There was no single Greek method and no uniform Roman method. The Mediterranean world covered many climates and communities across many centuries. Beekeepers worked with materials close at hand and adapted their practices to local flowers, weather, and custom. Written observations offer another kind of evidence. Greek and Roman authors describe swarming, seasonal activity, food stores, and divisions of labor within colonies. Their accounts often mixed practical knowledge with philosophy, poetry, symbolism, and folklore. In the 4th century BCE, Aristotle recorded extensive observations of bees. Some were remarkably attentive. He described aspects of colony life, including the gathering of food and the behavior of different bees. Other ideas reflected the limits of ancient anatomical study and the difficulty of observing reproduction within and beyond the hive. Ancient writers often called the central bee a king. They recognized that one individual held a special place in the colony, but they did not fully understand that this bee was female or that she was the principal reproductive bee. The interior of a fixed comb hive was dark and crowded. Mating took place away from ordinary view. Much of the colony's life could be inferred only indirectly. It is easy from a modern distance to notice ancient mistakes, yet a gentler view remembers how difficult the subject was. The observers had no modern microscopes, photography, genetic studies, or removable frames. They worked with open eyes, uncertain theories, and bees disappearing into shadow. Some ideas were not observations at all, but myths accepted as natural explanation. Bougonia was the supposed generation of bees from animal remains. It was not a real biological process. The story endured because ancient natural history often mingled experiment, inherited belief, and symbolic narrative. Roman agricultural writers brought a more practical tone to many discussions. Varro and Columella wrote about placing hives, caring for them through the seasons, capturing swarms, choosing materials, and harvesting honey and wax. Their advice reveals beekeeping as part of the managed countryside. A suitable hive site might be sheltered from harsh weather and placed near water and flowering plants. A shallow water source mattered, especially where steep edges might make drinking difficult. The surrounding landscape could offer orchard blossom, wild herbs, cultivated plants, and trees. Swarming received particular attention. A swarm is a queen and a large group of workers leaving an established colony to form a new one. To a beekeeper, a settled swarm offered a way to increase the number of hives. Watching for swarms became part of the seasonal calendar, requiring presence more than force. The beekeeper might hear a change in the air, then see bees gathering on a branch or shaded surface. Once clustered, the swarm could sometimes be guided into an empty hive. The new home, if acceptable, would soon hold fresh comb. Virgil's Georgics gave bees a poetic life as well as an agricultural one. In the poem, bees became images of social order and shared labor. Practical observation blended with myth and moral meaning. The colony served not merely as an insect community, but as a mirror in which people imagined their own society. The image was beautiful, but not always biologically exact. Bees do cooperate through complex forms of communication and collective behavior, yet they do not possess human laws, loyalties, or political intentions. Ancient poetry tells us as much about human thought as it does about bees. Still, practical wisdom continued beneath the metaphor. People noticed the timing of flowers. They learned that dampness, exposure, hunger, and disturbance affected a colony. They learned the smell of wax, the weight of a hive rich in stores, and the sound of bees within. In a storeroom, clay vessels hold honey and wax. Outside, the terracotta hives release the warmth of the day. The bees return over low herbs, passing through air scented with dust and leaves. Centuries will turn, empires and languages will change, while beekeeping continues in farmyards, estates, villages, religious communities, and private gardens. In parts of Europe, one hive form will become especially familiar, a rounded shelter woven from straw or wicker, resting beneath a wooden roof. The stone courtyard fades into a cooler garden. There are fruit trees now, and herbs beside a wall. Under a shelter, the woven shapes of skeps, wait in the quiet. Chapter 5. Skeps, Gardens, and Monasteries. A sheltered garden lies beside a stone building. Sage grows near the path, and fruit trees spread their branches above a low wall. Beneath a wooden roof stand several rounded hives, each shaped like a dome and woven from straw. This kind of hive is called a skep. Skeps were commonly made from straw or wicker, and were often coated or protected against rain. They became especially prominent in medieval and early modern Europe, though they were never the only form of hive in use. The period we call medieval lasted roughly 1,000 years and included many regions, climates, and local traditions. Beekeeping differed from one place to another. Some colonies lived in skeps. Others occupied hollow logs, wooden boxes, wall cavities, pottery vessels, or forms adapted to local materials. In a skep, bees usually attach their comb directly to the inner walls. This arrangement is called fixed comb. The comb could not be lifted out one piece at a time, as it can from a movable frame hive. Inspection was therefore difficult. Much of the colony remained hidden. A beekeeper could judge a hive through its wake, smell, sound, entrance activity, and the character of the surrounding season. The person tending it learned to notice what could be known from the outside. Were bees returning with pollen? Was the colony active in warm weather? Did the hive feel heavy with stores as autumn approached? Honey could be harvested by cutting selected combs from a fixed comb hive. Some historical methods badly disrupted or destroyed colonies, but not every harvest required killing the bees. Beekeepers also practiced selective cutting, transferring bees, and other methods intended to preserve colonies. Practice varied with place, skill, hive form, and custom. Because fixed comb management could be difficult, capturing swarms was important. A newly settled swarm could be placed in an empty skep, where it would begin building fresh comb. Beekeepers watched through spring and early summer, listening for the sudden fullness of wings and looking for clusters on branches. This work took place in monasteries, but not only there. Estates, farms, villages, and ordinary households kept bees as well. Religious communities are prominent in some surviving records because they preserved written accounts and required steady supplies of wax. Yet beekeeping knowledge also lived in spoken instruction, household routine, and the practiced hands of rural people whose names were never written down. Beeswax was especially valuable for candles. A well-made wax candle burned with a clear flame and less smoke than many alternatives. Churches and wealthy households used beeswax tapers, and their light became associated with ceremony, quiet interiors, and polished surfaces. Less costly tallow candles remained common. Beeswax light was not universal. Its value came partly from the care and resources required to produce it. Every candle began with flowers, worker bees, comb, and human labor. Imagine a cool room with stone walls. Finished tapers lie in neat rows. A small flame reflects on wood and metal, carrying the faint fragrance of warmed wax. Nearby, an earthenware pot holds honey beneath a simple cover. Before refined cane sugar became widely affordable in Europe, honey was an important sweetener. It could enrich food and drink, preserve certain preparations, and enter household remedies. As sugar became more available, honey markets changed gradually and unevenly. In some places the transition came earlier, while in others honey retained a central role for much longer. Honey could also be fermented into mead. The importance of mead varied greatly by region and period. It was one use among many, not a single universal drink of medieval life. The annual cycle of a bee garden was quiet but demanding. Shelters had to be repaired, hives needed protection from damp and weather. Swarms were watched for in the growing season. Honey stores were assessed before winter, when flowering would cease, and the colony would live on what it had gathered. A thoughtful keeper learned that taking too much could leave too little. The needs of the household and the needs of the colony had to be balanced, though that balance was not always achieved. In late autumn, the garden grew still. Bees clustered inside the skep, maintaining the living warmth at its center. Outside, stems dried and leaves gathered along the walls. The beekeeper could do little, except provide shelter and wait for spring. When warmer days returned, fruit blossom opened first, followed by herbs, clover, and the varied flowers of field and hedgerow. The hives became active once more. The woven skep is only one answer to the question of how to house bees. Elsewhere, people shaped long hives from clay and reeds, suspended hollow logs in trees, built nesting spaces into walls, or managed social bees that were not honeybees at all. So the garden opens outward. Straw becomes bark, clay, reed, and hand-smoothed wood. The cooler fields of Europe give way to dry hills, tropical canopies, monsoon flowers, and mountain valleys, each with its own enduring hive traditions. Chapter 6. Many Lands, Many Hive Traditions. There is no single road through the history of beekeeping. Knowledge developed in many places, carried by families, farmers, specialists, travelers, and writers. Materials changed with the landscape. Methods changed with the species of bee, the climate, and the needs of each community. In different African regions, beekeepers have used hollow logs, bark cylinders, woven hives, clay vessels, and many combinations of these forms. Some hives were placed near homes or fields. In parts of East Africa, hives were suspended in trees, where their position could help attract swarms and protect them from certain disturbances. A suspended hive belongs to both canopy and ground. It rests among leaves, surrounded by seasonal flowering. Bark and wood carry the scents of resin and rain. The design may be old, yet it is not unchanging. Beekeepers continue to adapt hive dimensions, materials, placement, and harvesting methods. Ethiopia holds long-standing regional traditions of beekeeping. Cylindrical hives have been made from wood, clay, basketry, or mixed materials. Mountain conditions, local plants, dry seasons, rains, and farming patterns all shape the work. There is no single Ethiopian hive, just as there is no single African method. Across North Africa and the Middle East, clay and reed hives have suited dry climates and available materials. Some could be arranged in rows or built into sheltered structures. Earthen walls softened changes in temperature, while narrow openings led into the darkness of comb. An inscription from the 1st millennium BCE records the Assyrian official Shamash-Rezu-Sur, claiming to have introduced bee breeding or beekeeping to his locality. The inscription is valuable evidence of managed bees and the importance attached to specialized knowledge. It is not proof that beekeeping began there. Centuries later, medieval Arabic agricultural works included practical discussions of bees and rural management. Writings associated with Ibn al-Awwam preserve part of this tradition, placing hive care among the wider arts of orchards, crops, animals, water, and land. Farther east, Asian apiculture included the management of the eastern honeybee, Apis cerana, as well as other species. A 6th century Chinese agricultural text, the Qimen Yaoshu, contains information on raising bees. Its pages show that practical bee knowledge had entered the written agricultural record of early medieval China. Asian hive forms have included logs, boxes, pottery, baskets, and cavities built into walls. Each offered a protected space for cavity nesting bees. The same basic needs were answered through different materials: shelter, suitable volume, an entrance, and a place where comb could hang. Not all honey gathering involved cavity nesting bees. In parts of South and Southeast Asia, people have long gathered honey from giant honeybees, including Apis dorsata. These bees normally build a large exposed single comb, often high on a tree, cliff, or structure. They are not managed in the same way as honeybees that readily inhabit enclosed hives. Honey hunting and hive beekeeping have coexisted, each requiring different knowledge. Across the ocean, the indigenous bee histories of the Americas began long before the arrival of European honeybees. Maya and other Mesoamerican peoples managed stingless bees, notably Melipona beechei, often housing colonies in hollow logs. Stingless bees are social bees, but they are not members of the genus Apis. Their nests, honey, and biology differ from those of Western honeybees. Their honey often contains more moisture and may have a sharper, more resinous flavor. Its storage qualities are also different. For Mesoamerican communities, stingless bee honey could carry importance in food, trade, ceremony, and medicine. These relationships should not be treated merely as a prelude to European apiculture. They are distinct and enduring traditions. European settlers later introduced Apis mellifera to the Americas during the colonial period. The dates differed by region, and the bees spread at varying rates. Their arrival changed local agricultural and ecological relationships, but it did not erase the older histories of indigenous bee knowledge. In Australia, indigenous peoples gathered honey from native stingless bees, and other bees. Modern Australian stingless beekeeping has grown from relationships with local species, along with continuing observation and adaptation. Across all these regions, the word traditional should never mean primitive or frozen in time. Beekeepers experiment, they borrow useful tools, retain older methods, alter hive placement, and respond to changing weather, markets, and landscapes. Nor should every act of honey gathering be called beekeeping. The distinction remains useful. Honey hunting collects from wild nests. Apiculture maintains colonies in managed homes. Between them may lie many forms of care, protection, attraction, and seasonal return. Imagine the hive forms gathered together, not as a contest, but as a quiet circle. There are logs darkened by rain, pale clay tubes, reed cylinders, woven baskets, pottery vessels, wall cavities, and wooden boxes. Their surfaces are different. Inside, each suitable home holds warmth, comb, food, brood, and a low movement of social bees. For much of history, that inner life remained largely hidden. Beekeepers knew it through experience, but seeing it directly was difficult. In the early modern period, naturalists began placing glass beside comb and opening wooden shutters onto the secret life of the colony. The next room is quiet. There are notebooks on a table, a hand lens, a shaded pane of glass, and the faint hum of bees behind it. Chapter 7. Watching the colony more closely. In a still study, daylight falls through a shutter. On the table lie pages of notes and careful drawings of wings, legs, and wax cells. Nearby stands an unusual hive with a panel of glass. Behind a protective cover, bees move over the comb. Transparent and partly glazed hives allowed early modern observers to watch colony life more closely. Glass offered a view that ordinary fixed comb hives concealed. It also created problems. Too much light could disturb the bees, and glass could alter temperature. Practical observation hives therefore needed shutters, covers, or other ways to restore darkness when no one was watching. These hives were primarily tools of investigation. They did not immediately transform ordinary beekeeping. A farm or household keeper could still rely on familiar woven, clay, or wooden hives, while a naturalist used glass to answer particular questions. One question concerned the colony's central bee. Ancient writers had often called this bee a king. In 1609, the English writer Charles Butler published The Feminine Monarchy, correctly emphasizing that the central reproductive bee was female. The title reflected the language of Butler's era, giving the colony a human political form. Yet beneath the metaphor was an important correction. The bee at the colony's center was not male. During the 17th century, the anatomist Jan Swammerdam studied bees through dissection. His work demonstrated the queen's female reproductive anatomy. What could not easily be seen through ordinary hive behavior became clearer through the patient study of bodily structure. Understanding still accumulated slowly. Knowing that the queen was female did not answer every question about mating, egg-laying, workers, drones, and the origin of wax. Each subject required observation under difficult conditions. In the 18th century, René Antoine Fairchild de Réaumur used observation hives and published detailed studies of insects. He watched bees through glass, compared events, and recorded the patterns that emerged. The hive became both a living colony and a place of sustained inquiry. Around the turn of the 19th century, the Swiss naturalist François Huber developed a leaf-like observation hive. Its sections could open somewhat like the pages of a book, allowing comb surfaces to be studied more closely. Huber was blind. His investigations depended substantially on close collaboration with his assistant, François Bernins, and with others who observed, described, tested, and repeated what took place. Their work is best understood not as the achievement of an isolated figure, but as a partnership shaped by careful questions and trusted description. Huber and Bernins helped clarify several parts of honeybee biology. Their studies supported the understanding that queens mate away from the hive. They examined colony responses to the loss of a queen and observed aspects of queen rearing and swarming. They also contributed to the recognition that wax comes from worker bees themselves. This last point could be seen in tiny pale scales produced on the underside of a worker's body. Gathered and softened, those scales became the material of comb. What had seemed almost magical could now be linked to visible anatomy and behavior. The sex and roles of the colony's members also became clearer over time. Drones were recognized as male, workers were female, though ordinarily non-reproductive. The queen was the colony's principal egg layer. These conclusions emerged through accumulated anatomical and behavioral evidence rather than through one single discovery. The work was not free from error. Early investigators made mistakes, and later researchers revised some of their conclusions. This is part of the ordinary movement of science. A claim is observed, tested, questioned, and refined. Behind the glass, the colony did not become simple. One mystery often opened onto another. A queen could be seen laying eggs, but the processes guiding worker behavior remained complex. Bees attended one another, exchanged food, cleaned cells, fed young, built wax, and responded to signals that human senses could not easily detect. Chemical communication, now understood to include pheromones, would become an important field of later study. A pheromone is a chemical signal used among members of the same species. The hive is rich with such signals, though an early observer might notice only their effects. In the softened light of the study, a hand turns a page. A sketch records the angle of a cell. Another note marks the time a queen appeared, or the response of workers after a change in the colony. Wooden shutters wait to close, returning the bees to darkness. Observation hives made the hidden life of comb more visible, but the comb itself remained delicate and often fixed in place. The practical question was still waiting. Could the beekeeper open a hive, examine individual combs, and return them without breaking apart the structure the bees had built? The answer would not belong to one person alone. It would emerge from older precedents, parallel experiments, and a careful understanding of the narrow passages that bees naturally leave between surfaces. Chapter 8. The Movable Frame. In a quiet workshop, lengths of wood lie beside a plane and square. The scent of sawdust mingles with beeswax and propolis. On a nearby bench, several rectangular frames rest in parallel, each shaped to hold a single comb. Movable comb was not a wholly new idea in the 19th century. Greek basket hives with removable top bars offered an important earlier precedent. Bees attached comb beneath separate bars, allowing a skilled keeper to lift some combs individually. Across regions, beekeepers had long experimented with ways to gain access while preserving useful parts of the nest. The movable frame grew from this longer history rather than appearing all at once. In the early 19th century, the Ukrainian beekeeper Petro Prokopovich designed a framed hive. His work demonstrated that comb could be supported in a form intended for controlled removal and inspection. The Polish-German beekeeper Jan Dzierzon also developed influential movable comb methods and contributed major observations to bee biology. Different inventors and practitioners approached related problems with different arrangements. In the United States, the clergyman and beekeeper Lorenzo Lorraine Langstroth patented a movable frame hive in 1852. His design became especially influential in North America and later far beyond it. At the center of the arrangement was a principle now called bee space. Honeybees tend to leave suitably narrow passages open so that they can move through them. Larger spaces are often filled with comb. Gaps that are too small may be sealed with propolis, the modified plant resin bees use around the nest. Bee space is commonly described as approximately 6 to 9 millimeters, or around 3/8 of an inch. Practical dimensions vary with hive design and bee population. What matters is the underlying observation. A carefully sized passage can remain open rather than being joined with comb or sealed shut. By placing that spacing around individual frames, a beekeeper could lift one comb without tearing it from its neighbors. The frame could rise slowly from the box, warm in the hand and edged with fragrant propolis. This changed what careful management could accomplish. A beekeeper could inspect brood, assess food stores, look for the queen, and examine signs of colony health. Selected honeycombs could be removed, while much of the nest remained undisturbed. Movable frames made these actions possible, but not automatically gentle. Skill and judgment were still required. A frame lifted roughly could harm bees. A hive left open too long could lose warmth or become agitated. Technology offered access, not complete control. Langstroth's arrangement proved practical and widely influential, and he promoted it through writing and use. Yet he did not invent modern beekeeping by himself. His work, built upon earlier ideas, close observation, and parallel innovation, the history of the movable frame is best understood as a long conversation among many beekeepers. Other 19th century developments supported the new hive systems. In the 1850s, Johannes Mering introduced commercially practical embossed wax foundation. Foundation is a sheet, often made from wax, stamped with the bases of cells. Placed within a frame, it encourages bees to build comb in a regular orientation. Foundation can help keep combs straight and make frames easier to handle. It is not used by every beekeeper, and not every modern hive relies on it. Some keepers prefer to let bees build more of their comb freely from a guide. In the 1860s, Franz Hruschka introduced the centrifugal honey extractor. Instead of crushing the comb to remove honey, a beekeeper could open the wax cappings over ripe honey and place frames inside a rotating drum. As the extractor turned, centrifugal force moved liquid honey from the cells to the wall of the drum. The honey then flowed downward and could be collected. The emptied comb remained largely intact and could be returned to the colony. For bees, drawn comb represents a great investment of wax and labor. Returning it allows the colony to refill existing cells rather than rebuilding the entire structure after each harvest. Imagine the extractor turning by hand in a quiet workroom. Its motion is steady and circular. Honey gathers on the inner wall, then runs slowly toward the bottom, amber in the afternoon light. Nearby, removed frames wait in order. The wax carries the warmth of the hive. Where wood meets wood, propolis gives off its faint resinous fragrance. Once the honey has been collected, the combs will return to their boxes. The movable frame became a foundation of many modern hive systems, but older and alternative forms continued. Top bar hives, fixed comb hives, logs, baskets, and regional designs remained useful in different settings. No hive makes the colony entirely transparent. Bees still respond to season, forage, weather, genetics, disease, and countless conditions beyond the box. The best equipment simply allows the keeper to work with greater care. Frames settle back into parallel rows. Above them, a wooden lid comes quietly into place. Around the hive are the other familiar objects of a modern apiary: a veil, a flat metal tool, and a smoker sending out one small curl of cool, pale smoke. Chapter 9. Tools of the Modern Apiary. The path through the apiary is dry beneath your feet. Beside one hive sits a small collection of tools, each simple in shape and quiet in purpose. A metal smoker rests on the grass. A veil hangs from a post. A flat hive tool catches a line of afternoon light. The smoker contains a slowly smoldering material, perhaps dried leaves or wood shavings. Its bellows send out cool smoke in small, controlled puffs. Smoke can interrupt alarm signaling and alter defensive behavior, often making the colony easier to handle. It does not simply put bees to sleep. The bees remain active and aware. Too much smoke can disturb them, just as rough handling or an inspection that lasts too long can cause unnecessary stress. Bellows smokers became established in 19th century beekeeping. Moses Quimby and later T.F. Bingham are associated with influential designs. Their devices help produce a steadier supply of cool smoke than less controlled methods. The beekeeper's veil serves another quiet purpose. Its mesh keeps bees away from the face and reduces accidental stings. Protective clothing does not separate the beekeeper from the colony so much as help the person move with confidence and calm. Through the veil, flowers and hive edges appear slightly softened. The flat metal object is a hive tool. Bees often seal small gaps with propolis, the plant resin they gather and modify. Propolis can hold boxes and frames together firmly. A hive tool slips between those surfaces, easing them apart and helping lift frames. Inside the hive, removable frames support individual combs. Some contain foundation, an embossed sheet of wax or plastic that guides comb building. Other frames may use only a narrow guide, leaving bees to construct most of the comb themselves. The lowest boxes usually contain the central brood area, where eggs, developing young, pollen, and food stores are arranged. A box placed above this area for honey storage is commonly called a super. Some beekeepers place a queen excluder between the brood area and honey supers. This is a grid whose openings are usually large enough for workers to pass through but too small for the larger queen. It can help keep brood out of honey boxes. Queen excluders are optional, and opinions about them differ. Some keepers value their usefulness, others prefer to manage without them. As with many tools, the choice depends on hive type, local conditions, and the beekeeper's aims. When ripe honey is harvested, wax cappings must be opened. An uncapping knife or fork lifts or slices the thin wax seals over the filled cells. The frame can then enter an extractor, where rotation draws out the honey without crushing the comb. Watch the honey moving down the smooth inner wall of the extractor. It gathers slowly, reflecting the light, and passes through an opening into a clean container, where it holds colors ranging from pale straw to deep amber, depending on the nectar sources. A feeder may also be found in the apiary. It supplies sugar syrup or other feed when a colony needs support. Feeding can be useful during shortages or particular management situations, but it is not a lasting substitute for varied natural forage. Colonies need landscapes that provide flowers, pollen, nectar, water, and seasonal continuity. Standardized equipment helped beekeeping operations expand. Parts could be exchanged, replaced, stacked, and moved more easily. Familiar hive systems now include Langstroth, Dadant, British National, and many regional designs. Even so, contemporary beekeeping is not limited to standardized frames. Top bar hives remain in use. Fixed comb forms continue in some settings. Beekeepers select equipment according to resources, tradition, climate, bee species, and personal practice. The purpose of a tool is not to dominate the colony. At its best, equipment makes careful access possible. A smoker can soften a defensive response. A veil can steady the person wearing it. A hive tool can separate parts without sudden force. A frame can reveal brood and stores, then return them to darkness. Every inspection still has a cost. Heat escapes. Bees are displaced from their work. Scents and signals are briefly disturbed. Good beekeeping therefore includes knowing when not to open a hive. On some days, entrance activity tells enough. Workers arrive with pollen. Others leave toward a field of bloom. Water carriers visit a shallow dish. The colony is active, and the weather is suitable. Observation from outside may be all that is needed. The tools are gathered again. The smoker's last thread of pale smoke disappears into the air. A lid settles back onto the hive, and the colony resumes its enclosed rhythm. At the edge of the work area, clean jars catch the late afternoon sun. Beyond them, the landscape opens into orchards, seed fields, hedgerows, and roads. During the 20th century, hives began traveling those roads in greater numbers. Their value was no longer measured only in honey and wax. More and more, growers sought the work bees performed while moving quietly from flower to flower. Chapter 10. Bees Across Farms and Continents. A spring orchard stands beneath pale morning light. Rows of trees are covered in blossom, each branch carrying hundreds of flowers. At the edge of the field, hive entrances open toward the day. Workers rise into the cool air and move among the trees. They gather nectar and pollen for the colony. As they enter flowers, grains of pollen cling to their bodies and may be transferred to the female reproductive part of another flower. This process, called pollination, allows fertilization in many flowering plants. Honeybees are generalist foragers. They visit many kinds of flowers rather than depending on only one plant. This flexibility has made managed colonies useful in a wide range of agricultural settings. Insect pollination is important for many fruits, nuts, vegetables, oils, and seed crops. The degree of dependence varies. Some crops require or strongly benefit from insect visitors. Others receive a smaller improvement. Not all agriculture depends on bees. Major staple grains such as wheat and maize are wind-pollinated and do not require bees for pollen transfer. It is therefore inaccurate to say that honeybees pollinate all or even most of human food. Their contribution is substantial, but it belongs within a more varied picture. Orchard growers and seed producers have long valued nearby colonies. During the 20th century, paid pollination services expanded greatly. Railways and motor vehicles made it possible to carry hives over long distances. Pallets and forklifts later allowed large groups of colonies to be handled more efficiently. Many journeys take place at night, when most foragers are inside. The hive entrances are secured, and the boxes travel through darkness with a subdued rumble beneath them. By morning, they may be placed beside a new flowering landscape. Large migratory operations can follow successive blooms. Colonies may visit almond orchards, tree fruits, berries, melons, or seed crops. Later, they may be moved to landscapes where abundant flowers support honey production. The details differ by region and operation. Such movement requires careful timing, water, ventilation, nutrition, and disease management. A field full of flowers may offer a brief abundance, followed by a gap when little else blooms. Western honeybees themselves have traveled widely through human activity. Apis mellifera is native to regions of Europe, Africa, and Western Asia. People introduced managed colonies beyond that original range. Honeybees reached parts of North America with European colonization during the 17th century. Their spread differed from one place to another, and feral colonies sometimes moved beyond areas of permanent settler occupation. On farms, managed honeybees joined pollinator communities that already existed. Wild bees, flies, butterflies, moths, beetles, birds, and bats also transfer pollen. Their importance varies by plant, climate, and region. Bumblebees may forage in cooler conditions when honeybee activity is limited. Certain solitary bees can be especially effective on particular flowers. Some plants require a style of vibration or body shape better provided by visitors other than honeybees. A diverse pollinator community can make pollination more stable. Different species work at different times, in different temperatures, and on different parts of the floral landscape. The presence of honeybees does not make those other pollinators unnecessary. Habitat that supports managed honeybees may not meet the needs of specialist wild bees. A specialist may depend on a narrow group of host plants. Another species may require bare ground, hollow stems, or dead wood for nesting. A landscape rich in one mass flowering crop can still be poor in nesting places or later season food. Where flowers are limited, high densities of introduced honeybee colonies can sometimes compete with native pollinators. The scale of this effect varies with habitat, season, floral abundance, and the number of hives. It should neither be ignored nor assumed to be identical everywhere. A thoughtful agricultural landscape can include hedgerows, uncultivated flower patches, water sources, and blooms that continue beyond the main crop. Such features may support honeybees and other pollinators, though no single planting serves every species equally. The orchard is brighter now. Bees move from tree to tree, while flies and wild bees visit blossoms closer to the hedgerow. Pollen passes between flowers in thousands of small, unplanned contacts. Later, the petals will fall, and the hives may travel again. Their entrances will open beside berries, seed flowers, or a broad summer field. The colony carries its internal world with it: queen, workers, drones, brood, wax, food, and signals, all enclosed within stacked wooden boxes. Travel can offer abundance, but it also brings challenges. Colonies from many places may be brought close together. Nutrition can become uneven. Parasites and pathogens may spread if management is poor. Weather may alter the timing of bloom. At evening, the transported hives rest in their new place. Most bees are inside. Beyond the boxes, the field waits for morning. The long history of beekeeping has made colonies easier to move and inspect. It has also given keepers new responsibilities: to watch not only honey stores, but mites, disease, forage, pesticides, climate, and the health of the wider landscape. Chapter 11. Challenges in the Hive. The beekeeper stands beside an open hive with a small notebook. One frame has been lifted into the light. The inspection is brief and deliberate. There is no need for haste, and no need to imagine that every difficulty means disaster. Colony health is built from many interacting conditions. One of the most serious threats to managed Western honeybees is Varroa destructor. Varroa is an external parasitic mite, small enough to hide among adult bees and within brood cells. The mite originally parasitized the eastern honeybee, Apis cerana. During the 20th century, it shifted to Apis mellifera and spread through much of the world. Western honeybee populations often lack the same degree of natural resistance found in the mite's original host. Varroa mites feed on developing and adult bees. They also transmit or intensify viral infections, including deformed wing virus. Without effective management, susceptible colonies often weaken and may die. For many years, Australia was described as free from established varroa. That account is now outdated. Established incursions were detected there in 2022, and eradication efforts were abandoned in 2023. Responsible management begins with monitoring. Beekeepers can estimate mite levels and decide when action is needed. Approved treatments vary by region, season, temperature, and hive condition. No single treatment is suitable everywhere, and repeated attention is often necessary. Management that avoids treatment is controversial where varroa is established. An unmanaged infestation may not remain confined to one hive. Mites can spread to neighboring colonies through drifting, robbing, and the movement of bees. Other health concerns include American foul brood, European foul brood, nosema-related disease, wax moth damage, and several viruses. Their importance differs by region. Some require specific legal or equipment responses, including the replacement or destruction of contaminated materials when regulations demand it. Clean tools and careful equipment exchange can reduce some risks. So can avoiding unnecessary crowding and maintaining good records. Moving colonies and bringing many hives together can contribute to stress or pathogen transmission when poorly managed. Nutrition is another part of health. A colony may appear surrounded by green land and still lack varied continuous forage. Large areas of one flowering crop can provide abundance for a short time, followed by weeks with little nectar or pollen. Flowering habitat loss, simplified landscapes, and gaps between bloom periods affect managed colonies and wild pollinators. Plant diversity matters because pollen sources differ in nutritional qualities. Continuous forage helps colonies meet changing needs through the season. Pesticide risk depends on the chemical, dose, timing, application method, and duration of exposure. Bees may encounter pesticides directly on flowers through contaminated dust or water, or in materials carried back to the hive. Some insecticides, including certain neonicotinoids, can have lethal or sublethal effects. Regulations and field conditions differ among countries. Communication between growers and beekeepers, careful application timing, and adherence to approved use can reduce some risks, though not every exposure can be eliminated. Weather and climate add further variation. Changing temperature and rainfall can alter flowering times, drought frequency, nectar flows, and the hours when bees can forage. The effects are not identical everywhere. One region may face earlier bloom, another extended drought, and another heavy rain during a crucial flowering period. Colony health therefore cannot be reduced to one cause. Parasites, pathogens, nutrition, pesticides, weather, genetics, and management may interact. This is also true of colony collapse disorder. The term became prominent in the United States in the mid-2000s. It described a particular syndrome in which many adult workers disappeared while brood and food remained. Colony collapse disorder was not traced to one universal cause. It is not a synonym for every winter loss or colony death. Current losses are usually discussed as outcomes of multiple interacting pressures, rather than one single explanation. It is equally misleading to say simply that bees are going extinct. Some managed honeybee populations are stable or increasing globally, even while particular regions and beekeepers experience severe losses. Managed honeybee numbers also do not measure the condition of wild bee populations. A honeybee colony is livestock under human care. Wild bee conservation is a broader question of biodiversity, habitat, nesting sites, and ecological relationships. The two concerns overlap, but they are not the same. Back at the hive, the beekeeper writes a short note. The brood pattern has been observed, food stores have been checked, a mite count will be recorded, fresh water stands nearby, and new flowers have been planted along the field edge. After rain, leaves move in the clean air. When the temperature rises, workers return to the flowers. The colony continues, supported not by one perfect solution, but by repeated acts of attention. The frame is lowered gently into place, bees move aside along the top bars, the cover settles over them, restoring darkness and warmth. Soon the apiary will enter evening once more. Tools will be cleaned and put away. The beekeeper's work will become for a while the work of waiting, watching the weather, and allowing the colony to carry on behind wood and wax. Chapter 12. The Beekeeper at Evening. We return to the apiary as the day draws toward its close. The same muted boxes stand along the garden edge. The grass is cooler now, and shadows have gathered beneath the trees. Bees still cross the golden air, though fewer than before. Present-day beekeeping takes many forms. A single hive may stand in a backyard garden. Several may rest on a city rooftop or in a community orchard. Research apiaries maintain colonies for the study of behavior, genetics, nutrition, disease, and resistance to mites. Large commercial operations may care for thousands of colonies and move them between flowering crops. All are forms of apiculture, yet their purposes and responsibilities differ. A backyard keeper may gather a small honey harvest and observe the seasons. A researcher may examine one narrow question over many years. A commercial beekeeper may balance pollination contracts, colony health, transport, and honey production across wide distances. Cities can sometimes offer long flowering seasons and varied gardens. Trees, parks, balconies, allotments, and roadside plantings may provide nectar and pollen across many months. But cities differ greatly. One neighborhood may be rich in bloom, while another offers little forage. Adding hives is not automatically a conservation project. Too many honeybee colonies in a small area may create competition for limited flowers, including competition with wild bees. The number of hives a place can support changes with season and landscape. Keeping honeybees is a form of agriculture. Protecting wild bees is biodiversity conservation. Both can be practiced thoughtfully, but they should not be treated as the same action. Often, planting native and seasonally varied flowers can help a wider range of pollinators more directly than adding another honeybee hive. A garden that blooms from spring through autumn offers continuity. Different flower shapes and sizes welcome different visitors. Wild bees also need nesting places. Some nest in undisturbed ground. Others use hollow or pithy stems. Certain species shelter in dead wood, where it is safe to retain. Pesticide-free flowering areas, bare patches of suitable soil, and a little untidiness can all become habitat. No single garden serves every bee, but a varied landscape creates possibilities. A bee may need only a small patch of open ground, a particular flower, or a hollow stem left standing through winter. Researchers continue to study mite resistance, bee genetics, nutrition, diseases, pesticide exposure, and landscape ecology. Selective breeding can improve useful traits, including aspects of health and manageability. At the same time, preserving genetic diversity remains important. A population with varied traits may be better able to respond to changing conditions. Scientific understanding continues to change. Recommendations that suit one region may not suit another. Local climate, regulations, bee populations, and disease pressures all matter. Good stewardship includes a willingness to learn again. Citizen science programs offer another form of patient attention. People record flowering times, wild bee sightings, swarms, and seasonal colony activity. A single observation may seem small, but many observations gathered across time and place can reveal useful patterns. A swarm may be among the most memorable sights. Thousands of bees lift into the air and gather around their queen before settling temporarily on a branch or another surface. Swarming is a natural form of colony reproduction. It is not automatically a sign that bees are lost or in distress. The old colony has prepared new queens, while the departing queen travels with many workers to establish another home. A beekeeper may collect the clustered swarm and place it in a hive, or the bees may find a suitable cavity of their own. Seasonal beekeeping involves watching as much as acting. Before a strong nectar flow, the keeper may provide space for expanding stores. During the season, colony health and mite levels are monitored. Before winter, food stores are assessed. Then comes the important discipline of leaving the colony undisturbed. Bees do not need every human question answered by an open hive. Sometimes the best information comes from the entrance, the weather, the weight of the box, and the flowers in bloom. The last foragers are coming home now. One arrives with a small yellow load of pollen. Another pauses at the entrance before passing into the warm interior. Around the opening is the familiar scent of wax and propolis, faint but enduring. Inside, the colony is settling into its evening pattern. Workers tend brood, arrange food, clean cells, and move through narrow passages. The queen does not command them. Each bee responds to local signals and conditions, and the shared order of the colony emerges once again. Beyond the apiary, other bees are also settling. A solitary bee rests in a stem or hidden burrow. A bumblebee queen may find shelter according to the season. Flowers begin to close, and moths prepare to visit those that open after dusk. The history of beekeeping is not the story of one invention, one culture, or one species. It begins before writing, with people finding honey in wild nests. It passes through clay tubes beside the Nile, terracotta hives near Mediterranean gardens, straw skeps under wooden shelters, suspended logs, wall cavities, baskets, and boxes. It continues through observation hives, anatomical studies, movable frames, wax foundation, extractors, smokers, and modern research. At every stage, knowledge remains partial. People learn more, revise old ideas, and adapt their methods. The bees also remain more than the sum of human plans. They respond to bloom, rain, temperature, disease, inheritance, and the needs of the colony. A beekeeper can provide shelter and care, but cannot fully control the season or the living landscape. Perhaps this is why the practice has always required patience. The hive offers products of great usefulness, honey, wax, and pollination. Yet it also asks the keeper to pay attention to things that cannot be hurried. There is the opening of the first spring flowers. There is the rise of a swarm into warm air. There is the weight of honey stored during summer, and the quieter work of preparing for winter. There is the decision to inspect, and the equally important decision to wait. The wooden lids are resting in place now. The tools have been carried away. No smoke remains in the air. Only the scent of cooling grass, warm wax, and nearby flowers lingers along the path. One final worker appears against the evening sky. For a moment she crosses the last band of golden light. Then she reaches the hive, enters through the narrow opening, and is gone from view. Behind the wood, thousands of bees remain awake in their enclosed world. Their warmth continues through the comb. Honey rests beneath pale wax cappings. Chemical signals pass from bee to bee, and the colony's low hum becomes softer as the air outside cools. The garden has grown still. Blossoms fold inward, leaves scarcely move, and here at the edge of the hive, the long history of beekeeping comes back to its simplest form. People noticing bees, learning their seasons, and caring for a life that can be guided, but never wholly commanded. The light fades from the hive roofs. The grass darkens. Within the sheltered boxes, warm wax and fragrant propolis hold the quiet of the colony. The bees are home for the evening, and the landscape rests around them,